Hello, everyone.
Hi, Bianca.
Hi, Bianca.
Just a quick question. Who do I refer to for attendance? Are they going to be doing the attendance for this meeting, or is just this an additional meeting for this month? I know we're going to have our next scheduled steering committee for next week, but I was wondering, do you need attendance? So I could ask around with all the members and all the residents.
Hey, Bianca, I believe this is listed as an other meeting and just as a separate meeting. So I don't know that it's necessary, but of course, just as always, I mean, it's also always good to see who's on. So if you just want to send over the attendance, that would be great. But yes, this is listed as an other outside of the CSC meeting.
Okay, I'll ask around who's in the call, and then I'll let you guys know for attendance.
Thanks, Bianca.
Great, so it is 5 o'clock and I just wanted to introduce myself as well. I'm Julia. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I'm also working with Erica at ILG and will be facilitating today's meeting. And I wanted to make sure everyone is connected to everything they need, so interpretation, that you can hear everything clearly. So if we want to go ahead and just make sure everyone's interpretation needs are set up, and we'll come back to this in a couple minutes as well, to make sure as people log on that they are getting connected.
En caso de que, hola, buenas tardes. Si necesita que escuchar esta reunión en español, aquí en la pantalla usted puede ver cómo hacerlo. Va a buscar el logotipo abajo que se parece a un mundo y dice Interpretation. Va a seleccionar eso y luego va a oprimir el idioma español para que usted lo pueda escuchar en ese idioma. Y luego, aparte de eso, va a querer también oprimir el botón que dice Silenciar audio original. O mute original audio, así para que no se escuche doble lenguaje. Y en caso de que tenga algún problema técnico, nos puede avisar así a través de chat, o simplemente puede interrumpir la reunión y decirnos que está teniendo problemas técnicos. Pero en caso de que no es algo que lo podemos arreglar, puede entrar por la llamada telefónica que está aquí. El número de teléfono está en la pantalla y es 888-240-3210. Y el código de acceso es el 2850-183 y tecla, o el número de signo. Y otra vez, si tiene algún problema ahorita o necesita ayuda a ingresarlo, puede avisarme en este momento.
Great, thank you, Marisela.
De nada.
Excellent. All right, if we could jump back to the screen, the name with the renaming, here we go. So if you are just joining and you haven't changed your screen name yet, that would be great to update this to include your first name, last name, and your affiliation. So if you're a resident within the current boundary, any other organizations or businesses, you can write your organization name. If you're from the Air District or CARB, if you are a member of the public outside of the current boundary, or interpreter is I. So thank you for renaming yourself. And we can also help with that if you have any challenges with renaming. Okay, well, let's go ahead and keep going. We've got 39 people on the line, so this is a good group to start, and we'll make sure as people continue to log on that they're all set up with interpretation. So if you are just joining again and you need to connect to the interpretation, the instructions are here. Maricela can help make sure you get set up as well. So we'll put a few more reminders in before we dive in. So welcome everyone. And so again, my name is Julia Salinas with the Institute for Local Government. And the team here I have today is both with Erica and Nicole. So we're here to help facilitate the process today. And the goal for today's meeting really is to talk about what should the boundaries for Arvin Lamont be. We had a really good discussion last month about kind of some different proposals, some different ideas of what it should look like. We want to continue that today, really make sure we get everything on the table of the different ideas, proposals that the boundary could look like, with the idea that next week, with the full, kind of the monthly meeting, that we actually get to vote on that and make decisions on that. But today is really a chance to kind of clarify, dive in, understand kind of the criteria, the reasoning, the pros and cons of different scenarios, really clarify what the different proposals are. And that's kind of our main goal for today, is to walk away with a clear idea of the various proposals we'd like to present next week. Again, knowing that next week, some more ideas from people not in the room today may come up. So we don't want to, deny anyone the chance to put forth a proposal for the new boundaries. So that's really the goal today. So a few Zoom basics before we dive in. And so as everyone knows, there's kind of looking at the options here to use your microphone to mute and unmute yourself. If you have dialed in by phone, you can press *6 to do the mute function. You can start and stop your video. You can use reactions. So hopefully everyone can use those. And if you have any trouble, just, flag us down or let us know if you have any troubles with any of this. I just realized my video is off. I'm sorry. And now I'm back on. Thank you. Oh, it sounds like there was a question, potentially.
I just wanted to say I'm here. My name is Salvador Partida from Committee for a Better Arvin in the city of Arvin.
Great, welcome, thank you. We have a few more, I think, logistics, make sure everyone is up to speed on the tech side, and then we can dive into the meeting. Okay, so raising your hand on Zoom. So that's definitely an important feature. What we'll do today is, we have a lot of people in the room, a lot to talk about. And so we're going to use the raise hand function to make sure that we give everyone a chance to talk. We want to try to encourage everyone to have the chance to talk. So if there's someone that raises their hand that hasn't yet spoken, we'll kind of jump ahead to them to make sure everyone does get the chance to speak. But we want to try to in the short hour, give everyone the chance to speak. So that's the raise hand function. This is also an option here, is if you'd like to connect your audio through to your phone. If you have a better connection on your phone, you can use this option here. And maybe Erica, actually, if you want to explain this a little bit more to folks.
Absolutely. This is an optional thing. If your technology is not great, your internet might be a little crackly, and you want to make sure you don't lose this connection, you can actually call in and then type in your participant ID and link your video and your audio. You don't want to do this if you're using the Spanish channel. It might not work with interpretation. But if you do want to make sure your internet doesn't die, or if you've already signed in 2 places and you want to link them, those are the options to do that. If you're also able to type into the chat, I can help walk anybody through that needs it. There's 2 ways to phone call in. You can use the phone call, where it'll show you the phone numbers to call and you can type in your participant ID, or you can click on the call me function and it will call your cell phone. So you have a couple options. These are optional. Either way is great. And again, if you have any issues or questions, feel free to drop into the chat and I'm happy to help you offline.
Thank you. And I appreciate everyone. You know, we won't have a chance to go around the room to do introductions, but if you would like to put in the chat and say hello, who you are, that would be great to give people a sense of who's in the room. So I appreciate people starting to do that as well. So thank you. Excellent.
I also see a hand from Jesus Alonso, and I'm not certain if that's something for any of the technology that we've identified so far this afternoon. Jesus, did you have a question?
Yeah, just on something that was mentioned earlier. It was said that we will vote on it next week. It wasn't clear who would be voting on it next week. If you can elaborate.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that in 1 minute. We just want to finish this up and we'll kind of describe the process, next steps, and all of that. So we'll definitely answer that question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, make sure.
Great question.
Yeah. So really quickly, you know, as any of the discussions that we facilitate, you know, it is challenging to have a conversation with, you know, 40, 50 plus people. And so to be able to do that well, we want to have a productive conversation and a respectful dialogue. So, you know, we want to really focus on what the goals at hand are. We also want to give everyone the chance to speak and also to step back and let others speak, hear new perspectives, people that don't tend to speak. We want to make sure we hear from everyone as much as possible. You know, it's also okay to disagree. For example, today is really about putting everyone's ideas on the table, making sure we've got clarity. You know, it's not about making a decision today. And so it's really, today is especially about, it's okay to disagree. We want to get as many good thoughts in the room. And so we want people to be respectful of each other's viewpoints if they are different. So just maintaining that civility, that respect. Also just being brief and to the point as much as we can, again, so that everyone gets the chance to participate. And similarly, you know, just being respectful of, you know, being able to challenge ideas, but not attacking people or their opinions. And that ultimately our goal is to build consensus. So just keeping that in mind, you know, we're going to start here today with really understanding the diversity of ideas and viewpoints. And eventually we hope to get to consensus around the boundary. Great. And so really quickly, I'll just mention, you know, the goal again for today is the Air District will present a little bit of background, kind of a reminder on, you know, the considerations, the criteria that went into the initial boundaries and the expanded boundary as well as a reflection of what we heard from the last meeting from them, you know, from participants in the last meeting around kind of what some of your ideas and thinking was around the boundaries. So just kind of a reminder of what we've heard so far. And then we'll just jump in, and the majority of today will be, you know, 30 minutes to really discuss what the different scenarios and possibilities are for the boundary, what some of the pros and cons are for them, and just be able to walk away from the meeting with, you know, some clear kind of ideas and proposals for the boundaries. And then we'll also make sure the Air District kind of describes the next steps around how this relates to membership, how this boundary will be decided, on who will be voting on it, and those questions that were already brought up. So I will hand it over to the Air District to dive in.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. We know that we're already starting with extra meetings, but I think it was clear and you all made it very clear that obviously it is important to make sure we all go through and, as Julia mentioned, hear each other's thoughts and voices and sort of get all the input we really can, so we can feel like we're moving forward with a boundary that really reflects the community's concerns. And so that's what we're here to discuss today. So I'm just going to go over really quickly. Oh, sorry.
Good.
I think someone maybe is unmuted, and maybe we can ask them to mute.
I think they're muted now, so they're good.
Awesome, I appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry, I can't see once I share my screen. So I'm really going to quickly just sort of high level, as Julia mentioned, what we've already discussed, go over a little bit. There were a lot of really great questions about the boundary and what it means. So we'll go over that really briefly. And then as just go over just some more in-depth discussion as to what changes or what amendments we'd want to make. And so what I'm showing right now is the original boundary that was proposed, sent over to CARB, and then adopted by the California Air Resources Board, who is the state board that sort of oversees the whole AB 617 program. And we heard a lot of concerns, not only through that adoption, but then in recent sort of months leading up to our first steering committee meeting. And then of course, at our last steering committee meeting, that this is not reflective really of the entire community of the Arvin Lamont area. And so we came at the last meeting with this yellow is the proposed adjustments, I should say, to the boundary. And what it does, and what a lot of your reflections were, is that it connects the Arvin Lamont area. It adds the Hilltop Fuller Acres up here just north of Lamont, and is really reflective of some of the concerns kind of up and down various pieces. There was a discussion about DeGiorgio and Comanche Road. I'm not sure, you'll have to all teach me how to pronounce all of the different streets down here. About a cold storage unit here. We heard lots of different interests about making sure we capture the communities in between both Arvin and Lamont. And so one of the things that came up through this discussion when it came to expanding the boundary, whether it was north to 58, some of you had mentioned, some mentioned a little bit of an expansion down here to the south. Most of those questions were reflected on, well, what does it really mean when we talk about the boundary and then we talk about the goals of AB 617? How do we make sure that drawing the boundary doesn't prevent us as a community from making sure we're targeting and understanding the air quality impacts in our region and making sure we're getting everyone at the table? So what we've done is we've put together here just a little bit, some things for the community to consider as we go through this discussion today. So the first thing is that the boundary, of course, impacts who is on the steering committee. Residents and businesses within that boundary, so within that line that we just outlined, are eligible to be on the committee. And we'll talk a little bit about membership here, as Julia mentioned later. And then government agencies, community organizations who represent areas within the boundary are also eligible. So that's sort of one, of course, main piece of the boundary is how do we create a committee. The next piece that a lot of you were asking, and we wanted to make sure that it was clear, was that sources of concern. We come up with what's called an emissions inventory, meaning we come up with essentially a list and a set of numbers of different pollutants within the boundary that we can use to sort of drive the air monitoring decisions or the emissions reductions decisions. And so we wanted to make clear that the boundary, although it defines maybe our main goals and mainly what we look at, sources that impact the air quality of that community, whether they are in that boundary or outside the boundary, can certainly be assessed. And we will definitely make sure, if it's the will of the committee, that whatever outcome we have at our meeting next week, based on input from today, we will still make sure that the emissions inventory can include whatever sphere of influence, just meaning if there's a source that's just on the other side, we always know that we can keep expanding the boundary, but at some point we have to stop and maybe think about the boundary, but then still look at those sources. And so we can work together as a committee to come up with what that means and what that looks like. So just something to consider. Community air monitoring is a piece of AB 617. And so when we talk about the boundary, we're really trying to monitor the impacts on people who live in the community or work in the community. And so really the air monitoring would be, the community rather, the CSC would have input on where and what to monitor within the boundary. And so we want to meaningfully use the resources we have and make sure that we're monitoring impacts to the community, near the schools, near where kids play, where people live. And so that's really going to be defined by the boundary. And then finally, we want to make clear that no matter what, eventually we have to come up with some sort of boundary. And so there are going to be people that maybe feel like they're left out of the decision or the discussion, but that's absolutely not true. And something we want to make sure, and you guys can help keep us honest, is we want to always have public participation. And that means people who are in the boundary but aren't a part of the CSC, but also folks outside of the boundary are certainly encouraged to participate as public members in all of our CSC discussions. And as you'll notice, even today, we are live on YouTube. So that is already occurring in terms of public participation. So I am going to flip back to the boundary here. And if it didn't happen already, because I can't see chat, can I confirm we actually have this link so you can zoom in and out of this map? Did that get dropped in the chat? And if not, can we please do that?
Not yet, but we'll let you know when it does.
Awesome, great. I'll go have Heather or someone else from the district team will drop in the chat, and you can all click on this and zoom in and out sort of along with us to sort of zoom in and understand exactly the small little nuanced places, the roads where we drew the boundary. And of course, as I mentioned last time, this is all based on community input, but we want more community input, and that's what we're here for today.
Thank you, Jess. Before you dive into kind of specifics, I'm hoping we can talk a little bit bigger picture about the process and, Jesus's question about kind of what it's going to look like next week for deciding on the boundary. So if you'd like to share, or you or Ryan would like to share a little bit about what that looks like as well, kind of just the bigger picture before we dive into details.
Yeah, let me stop sharing so we can see faces, and maybe I'll kick it over to Ryan in terms of who and kind of specifically to Jesus's question.
Yeah, so these are both really, really important questions, and thank you so much for everybody that's participating tonight. It's great to see 49 of us here talking about this tonight. There's a couple of things, and I brought it up during the last meeting about the number of applications we got tonight. On the one hand, it's super exciting because what we want is people interested and excited to work on this and work with all of us here. And at the same time, wanted to bring up the topic of the size of the steering committee and what some of the potential challenges that may present, and to be able to have that conversation with the steering committee in the hopes of hearing from the people that have applied, and we're going to bring up a few options to discuss with the committee on what we can look at as far as the makeup of the committee, and then get the feedback. And what we're hoping to do is get a sense of where the people that are interested in participating are at on this topic. And once we kind of have that understanding, that will feed into the next step, which would be to officially appoint people that are living within the existing boundary. So the process has to start off with the CARB selected boundary, and then the people that are appointed from that area would then vote to expand the boundary. And what we were looking to do is, take feedback on what some options on expanding the boundary look like that those appointed to the committee would then vote on. After that, then that would open up another period of time for any interested parties in just the extended boundary to apply for membership on the steering committee. And so, Jesus, I hope that answered your question.
So after we gather all of your information today, we will take those options and make them clear-cut options for that vote to happen. So it won't be like we won't have to reinvent the wheel at that meeting. It will be option A, B, C, and that steering committee from the original boundary, which is that pink that I just showed you, and I'll share my screen again in a moment. Once everyone's notified and as part of that committee at the meeting, you will choose between A, B, C, or if we come out of this meeting with A, and that's really our only option, then we choose between A or original, and that'll be the way that proceeds.
Great. Thank you, Jess. And I know that in our last meeting last month, there were a couple of other kind of concrete ideas and proposals that did come out with, I think that, still needed some more clarity, but Jess, if you also want to reflect what we heard in terms of some of the other ideas that I think were starting to be formed around potential alternatives for the boundary.
Absolutely.
Share that. And then it looks like, Jesus, did you want to respond? Actually, I see your hand up.
thank you for the responses. Then, if I'm understanding right, the ones who will be selected for the committee, which will be within the pink boundaries, will then decide whether or not to include those that are seeking to be included. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you repeat the question? I had a lot of
Echoey.
I had
Yeah, Jesus, there is an echo on your line. I think he was reflecting back what he heard and what he understood, which is basically that at next week's meeting, basically it's the people that are within the existing or the original boundary that CARB identified will be the ones that vote on what the new boundary looks like, the expanded boundary. And so that original group of members within that original boundary will make that decision of what the expanded boundary looks like. So.
All right. And then, so what benefit would the committee gain from expanding the boundaries if the area they live in is already included?
If everybody what?
No, what incentive would they have to expand the boundaries once they're already on the committee? Yeah.
It's a little hard to hear you with the echo.
I think what he's asking is what, and maybe we can ask folks maybe, and I see Bianca's hand up. I can just reflect on what we've heard as the comments that we've heard at the district hearings, at the CARB hearings. People actually that are within the boundary that represent Arvin or represent Lamont have been some of the vocal people in expanding the boundary to include Hilltop, to include Fuller Acres, to include the spaces in between, because they feel as community members that it reflects them as a community. And really separating the two isn't reflective, but that's me speaking off of what I have heard. So I'll definitely let others speak for themselves. So thanks, Julia.
Yeah, and Bianca, I see your hand up. So I do want to make sure Jess gets a chance to reflect what we did here in the last meeting before we dive into new thoughts. But Bianca, is your comment about kind of high level, or is it about what will be our next discussion?
I wanted to talk about the resident participation. I know that this is the biggest concern in the whole discussion of even expanding the boundaries, because we don't have a clear steering committee. And in Appendix C of the blueprint states that there's no limit from a household of resident participation. So I think it's very important to let all voices to be heard in this steering committee. And I really vote for including everybody that has.
You're breaking up a bit, Bianca.
An application.
Yeah, I think I got the gist of what Bianca was saying, that her feeling would be that all residents that submitted applications should have the ability to participate on the community steering committee. Is that right, Bianca?
Still can't hear you, Bianca. Shoot. Sorry, Bianca. We
and
can't
all
hear.
voices to be heard. So for the motion to be, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Are you actually, now we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Sorry. Is it a little bit better?
That's totally something changed.
So I think it's important to address this. To not be type it in.
Okay.
Right. Type it in. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Ryan, do you want to respond to that now, or should we hold on that and talk about process at the end a little bit more around that? Do you have a preference?
No, I mean, I think since it was raised as a point, we can bring it up. And so the discussion that was had last time. So currently we have, let me pull up, I have the exact number. we have a total of we've received 69 applications right now for people wishing to participate on the community steering committee. The breakdown is there's a 51 resident applicants, 8 business, 4 community-based organizations, and 6 government applicants with 1 alternate to that. So it would be by far the largest, and that's even before the potential of expanding boundary even more. So we could expect that number to grow more. And so what we wanted to do was to talk with the people interested in participating and hear some of the feedback and pose some possible suggestions, and then kind of hear from everybody on what their thoughts on that would be. And definitely heard Bianca that everybody that applied from residents would be allowed. The reason for that is what we have here, that we have multiple residents from households that have submitted applications, and the thought being that a potential option would be to have maybe a few of the members of the household participate as primary members, and some of the members participate as alternates for those members. As an option, you heard Bianca say that having all the residents is crucial to this process. The reason why we were bringing it up is just, we want to be able to have a good process where everybody will have an opportunity to equally be able to participate in the different conversations, and just wanted to raise that the possible challenge that if all 69 plus people attend these meetings, that could definitely pose a challenge, but wanted to hear from the different people on this topic to get a sense of where the possible CSC members are at on this topic.
Okay, so it sounds like, yeah, so it's a decision to be made. And it sounds like you want to hear a little bit more from people about like how they would like to approach that. So get more input on that decision. Ryan, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something that maybe, if it makes sense in our meeting next week to maybe put that on the agenda. Does that make sense, or is that too late to wait? Because I want to be conscious of the fact that we have 30 minutes to talk about the boundaries themselves today, with the hope of being able to, walk away from this meeting with some idea of proposals that we can bring to next week. But if people prefer, whichever you think is kind of more urgent to talk about, or let me know too, like what your thoughts are on kind of.
I think the topic of, or I understand that this isn't everybody that is participating or will participate, but just getting some feedback on and general thoughts on this topic, it's very important, and
yeah,
want to hear from those.
Okay. Yeah, so let's see if we can talk about it for about 10 minutes and maybe still squeeze in some, both this and the boundaries themselves, and the different ideas people have. And so I want to be conscious. I know that Kent had his hand up, and then I think Jose, and then Jesus. So let's start with Kent.
Thank you very much. I believe I agree with Bianca. So I live and farm in between Arvin and Lamont. And we're all one as far as I'm concerned. Our beloved communities are very important to us, and I consider us all one. I don't know how the voting process would, how you would verify who's eligible to vote if you had just the original boundaries. And then you mentioned Ryan mentioned something about, well, I don't want to call it ballot stuffing, but multiple members of one household would have multiple votes or something like that. And there's a challenge with something like that. I think I want to second Bianca's motion. I think she typed it out, and that would be for all those that have applied, have gone through the application process and applied, even those that are not within the boundary.
To clarify, I think Bianca is also saying including all the people in one household.
Okay. Well, then that's another committee thought. Is that right? I don't know. You know, are you going to select multiple people from, Ryan just mentioned it, are you going to select multiple people from the household to be on the same steering committee? Then you don't have the lack of disparity then. So.
Yeah, no, those are great considerations, Kent. Thank you. Let's hear from a few more people as well on this topic. So basically, again, the topic is around membership and, you know, should we, in Arvin, Lamont, in the whatever the boundary ends up being, whoever applies, anyone that would like to join the CSC, do we want to have any sort of limitations in any way on the number of members or multiple members from the same household? What do we want this to look like? Thinking through the trade-offs of the size of the membership, you know, the inclusivity there, but also the trade-offs with, you know, trying to, you know, have a large group of people to participate in 2-hour meetings, you know, just thinking through all of those and what that can look like. So next was Jose and then Jesus. And then after that, I see Bianca and Cesar. So Jose, would you like to go next?
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es José Mideles, soy residente de Lamont por más de 50 años. Y lo que yo les quería decir, en primer lugar, que yo dije que las boundaries se pusieran entre Panama Lane y Fairfax Road, que son las áreas más contaminadas de aquí de Lamont. Y en segundo, quería decirles que yo pienso que no es justo la manera que lo están haciendo, ¿verdad? Porque primero tenían que haber hecho el comité con los residentes que son de Lamont y Arvin, que son los que hemos estado peleando por 3 años, y luego nosotros decidir si se agregan más o no se... Sí, y que entre el comité decidir si agregamos a más lugares, porque nosotros sabemos cuáles son nuestras áreas y por qué hemos estado peleando porque se vinieran para acá.
Gracias, Jose. Could we have the interpreter, Reina?
Sí, buenas tardes. Soy José, residente de Lamont. Ya tengo viviendo, oh, sorry, I should be doing this in English. Oh my goodness.
No problem.
Sorry, it's been a long day. So I'm Jose. I am a resident of Lamont for 50 years. And originally when I had proposed the boundary changes, I had mentioned that it should be on Panama Lane and Fairfax because those were the issues where there's a lot of pollution. But I also want to mention that it's not fair what you guys are doing. You know, what we should be doing is we should have decided the committee first. And that way that the committee decides which boundaries should be the ones that are selected. And so it feels like we're not doing it the right way, and it really needs to be to what the residents want. And so the committee should have been decided first, and then we should be able to talk about boundaries later. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jose, that's a really great point. You know, I think that's the goal is by next week, the membership of the existing current boundary will have been determined and selected so that at next week's meeting, you know, it's clear who gets to vote, who is an actual CSC member of the original boundary, so that you all can make that decision together about what the expanded boundary looks like. So I think that's the goal for, you know, before next week, that there's clarity on who is a member. Thank you. So I see Jesus and then Bianca, then Cesar, and then Emma.
Looking at what at the slide that was shared earlier about what boundaries mean, including community members, sources, and community monitoring. It looks like since sources both inside and outside the boundaries will be reviewed or looked into, then the biggest reasons to expand the boundary is to have inclusivity and to be able to place community air monitors in key locations. As all of us that are Lamont, Arvin residents, Hilltop residents, we know that the refinery is one of the biggest issues we see, in our community. So there is even that much more reason to expand the boundaries. At the very minimum, placing it at the yellow boundary. That in itself would be should be the starting point for both forming the committee, and move forward with the boundary. So I think that a lot of residents, Lamont, Arvin, and Hilltop have been advocating for AB 6177 to come to our community. So it's only right to also include the community members outside the boundaries into the decision-making process, and thus including them in the committee as well.
Thank you, Jesus. So I know I had trouble understanding you, but I saw Jess nodding, like you're like able to like
read through the
echo. Yeah.
I
So if you
believe
want to just rephrase what was said so that the interpreter can also make sure to
absolutely. And I'm going to share my screen briefly and I'll unshare so we can get to the other questions. I believe what Jesus was mentioning was that he feels that with the sort of the considerations that we went over earlier, that the boundary is really more so reflective of air monitoring and committee makeup, and a little bit less so of the sources, because we are going to talk about sources that impact the boundary, whether they're in or out. And then he advocated saying, at the very least, making sure we expand out to the yellow, because all of the folks, whether they're in the pink or the yellow, we're all part of bringing 617 to the area. And then he said that folks that are outside of this pink now should also be considered as part of the decision-making process for whether or not the boundary is expanded. I think I captured it.
Great. So anyone that's in that yellow boundary should also get to decide next week what the boundary looks like. Is that
I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Be part of committee as well.
Okay. Thank you. Great. And so I want to spend a few more minutes, focusing our conversation again on kind of the membership who gets to vote on the boundary before we get into the details of the boundaries themselves. So hopefully the next few comments are focused on that. And then I do want to make sure we get some time to also talk about different proposals or scenarios of what the boundary itself could look like. So we can bring that as ideas, concrete ideas to start the meeting off with next week. So I have Bianca, Cesar, and then Emma.
Hi, I don't know if you could hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this meeting was originally to talk about the boundaries and not waste time, and we're still wasting time. We're at 5:41 and this is an hour scheduled meeting, and yet we're still having the conversation of who's going to be in the steering committee. I think we should surpass that and say, you know what, this is a motion to be brought up and move forward, because if we're just wasting time, we're gonna be behind on the SERP and we need to move along. So I really want to bring that motion again and say, you know what, include all these residents that have applied, because these residents have been working, have been advocating, and should be included in all this process. And as you see, there's multiple households that have multiple people in this process at the moment, and they're even listening through the whole process. So I really strongly agree to make all these applicants approved and then move forward for the boundaries, because as we mentioned, we're going to waste more time and that's not right.
Thank you. Well, I do want to just make sure, are there any last comments about more about the membership before we move on into the specific boundaries? I know I see some hands up. So for anyone with your hand up, is it specifically about this topics so that we can move to kind of the details of the boundaries themselves. I agree with Bianca. Like, I'd love to make sure we have, 15 minutes for that today if we can. So anybody, or do we want to just move straight to kind of the scenarios of what the boundaries could look like and what we want to bring to start the meeting off with next week?
Hello, everyone. My name is Emma de la Rosa with Leadership Council. And just to support Bianca's comment, I think it's important to simply allow everyone who has applied in the steering committee, even though some of the folks are may or may not be part of the pink lines, the original boundaries. However, folks within the yellow boundaries have been advocating to the state as well to include that community. And in terms of the multiple people in a household, it's an understand. You have to have an understanding of our communities and the work that we do. And not everyone, just because there's multiple people in one area, doesn't mean that they will bring the one isolated thought. People work in different areas, whether it be the fields or in the other industries. So it's important to have those multiple opinions and perspectives at the table. So I agree with including folks from the same household in the steering committee. And if we have an agreement to take the motion to allow folks to be part of, everyone who has applied to be part of that, then I think we should move forward with that motion so we can continue with the boundary conversation.
Okay, so one scenario could be just to kind of get a sense from people on the call right now of if that's something that they want to do. I would want to make sure, are there any other proposals different from that for how to address membership? So I'd want to just open that before only having one vote, yes or no. Are there any other kind of very different or differing proposals on how that can look with membership?
There are a couple chats, just so I haven't even started reading them yet, but just to bring them to your attention.
Okay, yeah. So
Jesus Perez has said that membership should be limited to one household. Some others are agreeing with Bianca that multiple members of the same household should agree. And then just from a governance standpoint, I think we defer to the Air District on the fact that no committee currently exists. So how we would take that motion or move forward with it based on not knowing who's there really is up to the Air District and CARB. At this point, we could certainly do whatever is the will of this group today and the Air District today.
Okay. And then I know there's a few other hands up. Anybody else want to say any last thoughts on kind of what, either it sounds like there's two proposals here. One could be to allow anyone that applies to be a member. One is to limit to one person per household. Any other kind of scenarios that people would want to put forth? And we could just do a quick kind of straw poll at this point. I think doing a straw poll will give the Air District a sense of, where they should, the direction they should take on this, so that it's something that the group that's here today, at least, is, it's representing that. So any other quick thoughts on different scenarios besides those two that we could do a quick straw poll on?
Yeah, I just wanted to support the idea of approving the multiple people in the same household. There's obviously different perspectives, but I also want to bring to attention that.
Sí, mire, yo soy José Mireles y para mí que varias personas voten, porque si son varias personas en una familia, son gente que nos había ayudado cuando íbamos a Shafter hasta las 11 de la noche ahí abogando y todo eso. So yo pienso que es justo que también ellos puedan votar.
Que sean múltiples personas por familia o por
oh, English?
No, I'm asking him.
Oh,
sorry.
okay, got it.
Question. Señor Mireles,
personas por casa.
Okay, múltiples personas por casa. Okay, it sounds like his vote is that he wants multiple residents per household to be able to be on the committee.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, Cesar, I know that between the Spanish line, it's sometimes hard to hear if somebody's already speaking. So sorry for that interruption, Cesar.
Hey, Julia, can Ryan Moore weigh in from CARB?
Well,
yeah, well, I just want to make sure Cesar was off.
If I could quickly.
Oh, sorry, Cesar, sorry.
That reducing emissions is obviously within community interest and public health, but there are some private industries here who would be directly affected by that. And I would like to make sure that the people who vote and have that voting power are community members, so as not to skew what is supposed to be a community-led process, by private industry and have the majority of that money go towards incentives. This is something that has frustrated people in Shafter, and this is something that we should avoid early on in the process here in Arvin. I mean, due to the map, at the very top of the Lamont map, it excludes Kern Oil and Refinery. They have obviously a lot of political clout. They were able to pull 2 Democratic senators to try to do a gut and amend to exclude them from area emission laws. And also they have 2 pending violations against them. Obviously, we want to make sure we include all of these emitters and polluters of the community because they obviously affect the community. And making sure that everyone's voice is heard is important because I do agree with what Bianca and Jose Mireles and others have shared about having different people in the same household who do have that different perspective and understanding, having a cultural competence of immigrant communities as well.
Great, thank you. Excellent, so we will do a quick straw poll. Brian, would you like to share a few words before we do that?
Sure, yeah, this is Brian Moore with the Air Resources Board. And this kind of goes along with what was just said. So when we developed the guidance document, we really wanted to make sure that the majority of CSC members were residents. And because of the outpouring of support in Arvin Lamont, we're definitely going to hit that. With allowing more than one person to vote from household, I was wondering if there'd be a concern, like if a community-based organization or a business also would like to have more than one representative, if that's something that would need to be addressed as well. If we did extend it to everybody that did apply. Just one thought.
Yeah, so that's kind of one of the details of the question of if we allow anyone that applies to become a member, what that could be a scenario that would happen as well. And do we want to create any limitations in any, on any end, whether it's a business or a household? So first, how about we just do a quick straw poll on just this basic idea, if we to just allow anyone that applies to become a member, and just how about we do like a raise hand if that's something that you feel like is a yes. And then I think it's what Brian brought up are good concerns to also talk through and make sure, what does that look like? So can we do a quick straw poll and just do a raised hand with the raised hand function to see if in general you would support that anyone who applies within the boundary should become a member?
Within which boundary? I'm sorry, yellow or pink?
So this would be, I think eventually this would be whatever the final boundary is, right? That's what we're talking about here, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So if you support the motion, I think to basically allow anyone that does apply to the CSC to become a member that's within the final boundary that they should get to become a member. So this could include people from multiple households. It could include multiple people from one household, multiple people from potentially one business, unless we decide to put constraints on that, which we can talk through. But generally, the idea of anyone that applies.
Julia, I mean, one thing though, we have like standing guidance on participation from. The one thing that we didn't have standing guidance on was resident. We had standing guidance on community-based organizations.
Okay.
And others.
And that was one per organization or business.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's already been decided on then. So I guess that wouldn't be a concern then of multiple representatives from one organization or business. So really it was the households was the only that was up to interpretation. Okay. So I am.
Does it include industry folks? Because I know that I believe it was industry folks or people from the government don't have a vote in this motion, or am I right or am I wrong? Or anybody could vote?
Yeah, who are voting members and who's not? Yeah, that's a good question. Would one of you want to clarify, Jess or Brian?
So yeah, once we have a steering committee, that historically the government members were ex officio, meaning that they could not vote. When it came to businesses, historically, and this was each community kind of putting together their own charter. So we can only speak from experience in Fresno and South Central, South Central Fresno, Shafter, and Stockton. There wasn't a limitation put on who could and could not vote from those members, like business, community-based organization, faith-based organization, residents. They were all allowed to vote. Now, I know that there's been more conversation about conflicts of interest since some of those charters have been developed. And so that would be a conversation to look to include that language in that document, as opposed, whereas this discussion it's more just trying to understand the thoughts of all of you tonight, and get a sense of where you're at as a community on this subject.
Does that answer that question actually around who has voting power and who doesn't? Does that help answer that question? Okay. So I see about, let's see, 1, 2, 3.
The numbers was 14.
Okay.
Julia, for people that had hands up with the current people eligible in the current boundary, anybody who applied would be eligible to serve on that CSC in the approved boundary.
Okay, great. And then can everyone lower their hands? And what I'd like to do is just get a poll for anyone that thinks that there should be limitations on, maybe one member per household for residents. So we'll lower hands and then just see if anybody supports a different scenario, which would be something like that, where there's a limitation on, limiting one per household. So raise your hand if you feel like that would be a better approach.
So what does a yes vote mean?
So now the yes vote is if you instead would support a proposal to limit to one person per household, limit membership to just one. And then with the idea of additional members would be alternates from that household, would serve as alternates. Okay.
Meaning, and for those of you, alternates means they can still, be a part of the meeting, be participatory, and then even in the absence of the main person from the household, hold the vote for that household.
Yep. Okay. So I think I see 7 hands up, six hands up. Okay, so we've got about about 14 people that supported the first, about 7. Now I see 4 hands up, so I'm not sure.
I think it was originally at its highest, it was 7, and then people started lowering hands.
Okay, good. So we can basically gauge where people are feeling about this. Ryan and Jess, would you like to kind of present kind of how to move forward and kind of close up this topic?
Yeah, we hear from everybody. So I think there's a couple of things that we did talk about, and Brian, you may want to weigh in here. So in regards to having multiple people from a residence, what we could do is we could move forward with that. Now, with expanding the boundary, we're going to get more people. The one thing I think we're going to have to constantly evaluate is how this process is going. It needs to be done in a way that everybody gets to participate and feel good. So, I mean, I think that, to be fair, I think we just need to constantly evaluate, and hopefully, and I believe this will happen. I believe everybody will be mindful of the size of the committee, make room for everybody to be able to participate. I think that's just one of the commitments that I think, having a really, really large committee, we really have to rely on. And so, there may be, if things aren't working out, I think that's just another time that we would have to bring it back and have an honest conversation with those that are participating. And but at this point, and I think, kind of seeing where it was at, I think we would include everybody that has applied from a resident standpoint. Now, the only thing on the process-wise, the blueprint does say that the community steering committee members have to come from the community. And so the only community that we have right now was the one that CARB approved. And so, as much as, we understand the desire of everybody to expand it, process is still important. And so my recommendation there would still be to have the people in the kind of the existing boundary vote to expand it we've heard from, like, during the last meeting, this meeting, the desire for people has overwhelmingly been to expand the boundary. So I don't think there's a concern there. It's not an effort by the district or CARB or anybody else to try to not have the boundaries expanded. It's just that there is a proper process that I think is important. I think, you know, and that everybody, I would hope that wants to participate in this understand, and you know, kind of hearing what Bianca was saying tonight, you know, a little bit of that, you know, we do need to have the process for this, and some of these conversations are tough and they're challenging, and I hope that you know that none of this time is wasted, because this is all honest, good conversation that we're having, because it's really setting the stage for where we go from here. So I think we all need to have conversations. We need to get all these things out there and discuss them so that we can all move forward. So that would be
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, and I appreciate everyone's time to actually kind of work through this, because I do feel like this is the first thing to really kind of agree on and figure out how to move forward with, even before what the, you know, the new boundaries will be. So sorry to kind of move towards this, but I think it's a really important decision to make quickly so that we can move forward, you know, as a committee. And so it sounds like, you know, basically what I've heard so far is that their district will allow anyone that applies in whatever the boundaries end up being will become members based on just kind of gauging general support for that idea. I mean, we know that there's some, you know, a number of people that also didn't think that was a good idea. And we want to think through and kind of work out the reasoning for that and think through, how do we make such a large committee work? That's going to be our biggest challenge, is thinking through the structures and how we kind of put together kind of a process to really be able to get through a lot of work in a large group, and what that looks like going forward. So that will be the biggest challenge with a large committee. So from what I've heard as well from Ryan, you know, we're going to stick with the vote next week. The decision about what the final boundary looks like will still be based on the original CARB identified boundary, is what I'm understanding. Is that right, Ryan? So that's the group that would vote on the expanded boundary. And so what we can do is next week is start the meeting out. What I'd like to see if we can, between now and next week, is if we can get ideas in writing from folks around here. Here's my proposal of what the boundary should look like, and here's why. If we can get that in advance of the meeting next week, then we can kind of put that all on the table, present that, and start the meeting out still with concrete proposals of what the boundaries could look like and why, and just still start the meeting out that way as we planned. So if that's something that can be kind of homework, as opposed to talking through it all today, we can present that next week, and then talk through it next week, and then decide and vote. So does that sound okay to folks? Is there anything that's kind of, you feel like is another missing piece, or something that, another way to do this that would work better for you? Okay. All right. And I know there were some, you know, some chats as well. I realize it's 6 o'clock now. So I don't know if anyone wanted to, Erica, did you want to summarize any of those chats, or maybe we can hold on some of the questions and comments? But did you see anything, Erica, that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think it's, you know, I think to your point, there are a number of comments in the chat. This is already going to be an interesting and a difficult process. It will be a little complicated. Some people think that a CSC larger than 20 people is going to be hard to get anything done. And some people believe that we should let everyone in and we'll figure it out. So I think, you know, we're going to learn through this process over the course of the next couple of weeks. And I think there are opportunities to set structures in place so that voices can get heard, but it's helpful for everyone to know that there's not a great consensus on this. And even thinking about expanding the boundaries, knowing that there will be additional voices brought in if those boundaries are expanded, and those voices could be part business, part residents. So that's what we're seeing in the chat. And we're asking, some people are asking for questions about the profile of applicants and what those people look like and those businesses look like. And, you know, it's a very complicated and complex process. And I think the committee, or the potential committee members, are starting to see the complexity of this discussion. And everyone wants this to work well, but it's going to require a little bit of massaging. I do see 2 hands as well, just so you know, from Tim and Brian.
Well, Tim can go ahead.
Hi, I had a question regarding any, like you were saying, if we had any if we wanted to weigh in where the boundaries would be, can we submit our comments to the email that is sent by the group to the Zoom meetings? Because I would like to see some of my ideas regarding the boundaries be submitted.
Yes, that would be awesome. So yeah, so the hope is that, you know, between now and before next week, you know, Jess or someone from their district will send out an email and get everyone's input on potential scenarios of what the boundary is like, and then just kind of piece those together and kind of to, you know, in a few concrete proposals of here's what we've heard, here are the potential alternatives for what it could look like. Be able to share a bit about why you think that should be, you know, the boundary as well. So share that thinking, Tim. So that'll be really helpful. Thank you.
And regarding who is on the original steering committee, now because I live in the original boundary, my house is in the original boundary, and I submitted my application over 2 months. When will I know that I'm on the actual?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be getting stuff out, Tim.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Everyone will know before next week as well, if you're, you know, that you're an official member. So yes. Okay. I see Brian's hand, and then we'll end there since I know we're a few minutes over. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't want to take too much time. I'm trying to rack my brain and think of similar situations in other communities we've worked in that have had issues like this. And one thing that Richmond did that popped up is they wanted to limit the size of the committee to make it more manageable. But so what they did is actually they limited the number of people from industry, representatives from industry that could join to ensure that it was community driven. So that was kind of a unique thing that Richmond did. Also, other larger committees have utilized a subcommittee structure to help move things along. So there's just two examples I thought of that seem to have worked in the recent past.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll definitely want to learn from other communities that have done this, that have been in large CSCs. How did they do it? What worked well? What was challenging? And let's learn from others. So we'll definitely want to do that. Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay. Yes, Salvador.
Who has the responsibility to choose whether the committee has a limit or not? And what would be the number of members that are going to be involved in that committee?
Great. Jess or Ryan, do you want to answer that?
I have no idea, so I'm not sure exactly how you guys are going to go about choosing the number of members that are going to be in that committee.
Right, and maybe I'll look to Brian because he probably knows the blueprint better than me. But I believe actually per the blueprint, Brian and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually maybe the district that chooses the committee. Is that right, or is it?
So yeah, the district APCO is the one that appoints steering committee members.
Yeah, that's correct. And just the composition is 50% residents plus one is what, so majority is composed of community residents.
Great. Well, I want to appreciate everyone's time. Thank you for this really good discussion. I think this was a big, an important topic to address. So I appreciate your input and perspectives, and look forward to figuring it out together, how to work together in a large group, and I think we will. So with that, I'll say it's 6 minutes over. So thank you and have a good evening, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's your job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.